Thursday morning. I want to let you know we're going to be hanging out at the Carolina Cup this weekend. I'll be out there in the morning time. Terry Ford will be out there in the afternoon, so come by and see us if you're hanging out at the Carolina Cup out there in Camden. Jumping back in, Wes, you have a question.
I have such fitting breaking news at this point.
Okay.
One of Camden's best and brightest. You know what I'm talking about?
I do not.
Joyce Edwards.
Okay.
South Carolina women's basketball signee. This worked out so well. Has been named Gatorade National Player of the Year.
Fantastic.
So the rich get richer does the South Carolina women's basketball program. And you knew she would be in the running for it. And she obviously has been right up there, either first overall, second overall, if you look at the various rankings out there. And as of about 19 minutes ago, it's official.
Well, you're going to be talking about another true freshman that's going to come in with the ability to make an impact next year on what is hopefully maybe a defending national championship team once again.
Yeah, we're going to find out. So our crew, a.k.a. Chris Wellbaum, I believe he's already in Albany.
Yes, I believe he is. He is either he was supposed to be in the air from 9 until 11, so he should be there now.
Yeah, he's going to be there for Media Day today, and we'll have plenty of coverage leading into that game tomorrow, 5 o'clock.
Have him on tomorrow to preview that.
Yeah, we need to tell him that. But
we need to inform him that he's going to be on the show.
Yeah, I made the executive decision that he is.
Fair enough. Chris is always good. So we'll talk to him tomorrow, previewing that matchup. The Gamecocks taking on Indiana tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock in the Sweet 16. That'll be heard on our sister station, 98.5 WOMG. Want to jump back into the spring football conversation. Another observation you guys had from earlier on this morning. First look at maybe an offensive line combination. We don't know if this is necessarily the ones or just something that they threw out there for this particular drill. But reading from left to right here, you had Ja'Kai Moore, Kamar Bell, Bershawn Lee, Trevon Ball, and Casey Henry out there taking reps as one unit earlier on this morning.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, let me give the disclaimer. They've worked some different combinations there. And this was, I think, 1 to 2 plays that those guys were out there. But
it's a little bit different than day one.
It's a little bit different than day one. And it's now who would have been different in that instance?
I don't think Bell was in it day one, was he?
Yeah.
He was.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, Marquis Anderson was in there.
Marquis Anderson was in there. But look, and I think this brings about, we'll get back to that, but like a larger point, there's a little bit of shiny object syndrome with some of the new faces, right? Like the freshman offensive linemen, you kind of know, hey, it's not going to be a surprise if those guys don't come in and play immediately, but Josiah Thompson getting, some immediate, wouldn't be a big surprise at all if he ended up factoring in somehow or another in this thing. But you kind of forget with those guys coming in, because it's another heralded freshman class with some of the transfers, you kind of forget about some of the guys that are already on the roster that have played a lot of football. Ja'Kai Moore is a good example of that. I mean, he's going into, this will be year 6 at South Carolina for him, I think. He's played guard. He's played tackle. He's getting some first-team reps at left tackle, and he's a guy that I think could continue to progress. Vershawn Lee's played a lot of football. He's, by all accounts, going to be the starting center, most likely. And then, you got a guy in Casey Henry, very intriguing. The staff has always seemed to like him. Won the starting job before the North Carolina game last year. Unfortunately, got rolled up, played about 4 plays, and then was done again. And that was after he was already recovered from another preseason injury. He's a guy that's big, physical, very aggressive, kind of has some leadership qualities, I think, plays with a mean streak. And so, there's plenty of guys just because this offensive line struggled last year and some of the guys that we're talking about were involved, you can't forget about them.
I think it's going to be very difficult to predict with the exact 5 with some accuracy this far out, just because there's going to be a domino effect. Ja'Kai Moore, right now, was the left tackle last week when we were out there for very quick segment, and then was the left tackle today as well. However, I think, don't quote me on this, I think Tree Babalati is just one of the guys that's a little bit banged up right now, so I'm not reading into that too much. I think that goes back to kind of what Beamer says, and that, hey, don't completely read into it a depth chart at this point because it's not a real depth chart. I think Tree's been a little bit banged up. But still, if, and Marky Anderson, who was out there day one, also is a guy coming off of an injury. So he is still finding himself and trying to get back to, 100% what he was before, I think. And so if you look at that position, one guy winning a spot could mean, well, yeah, you just beat somebody out, but the guy that just got beat out, he may just shift over to another spot. So Ja'Kai, if let's say Tree and Josiah are kind of both holding down left tackle, then does Ja'Kai Moore move back to one of those guard spots? If ultimately Josiah wins out and is the left tackle, I think that could happen at some point. Then is Tree now fighting at right tackle or even one of the guard spots? He's a wide-bodied kid. We've always known he could play guard or tackle. And so I do think we just don't know how this is going to kind of shape out yet, but you do have more options there. And, if a guy who Boogie Huntley spoke very highly of yesterday and Torricelli Simpkins III, if he pushes really, really hard at center, we've seen Vershawn Lee play multiple other spots, guard or tackle.
Yep.
So do you sit there and say, well, wow, both these guys should be on the field? You're not going to move Simpkins because he can play guard, but he's more of a center, I think. So you say, all right, Torricelli, you're now the center. Vershawn, you're starting elsewhere. So I think because of all the different aspects, like the domino effect at play here, you could write 5 guys in a row, but I think it'd be pretty difficult, 5 months out to actually predict it.
Well, and I think the word that you use there is kind of a theme at a few positions, which should excite some Gamecock fans. Now, on the other side, there's some positions that maybe have more questions than they did last year. Then you got some positions that you feel better about. The word options, think about, we just finished a conversation first segment about running back. You've got more options because of your personnel there. Last spring, you go in saying, all right, here's a transfer from Division II, ended up being a good player, and here is DeCarrion Joyner, who's never played running back since Pee Wee, and that's kind of what you've got. That's what you're rolling with. This year, a lot different because of your personnel. Same thing with the offensive line. Remember, the offensive line going into the UNC game last year was a pretty big concern. Ended up being well validated because we saw, 9 sacks in that game. You had some questions about who are going to be the tackles. Is there enough experience there? What's the talent like? You've got more options. Now, some of them are younger. Some of them are transfers. And I think this is a position on the offensive line where the competition is going to continue. Whatever the starting 5, quote unquote, is exiting spring, you still got a whole summer in preseason. And because of the, I think, quality and experience and talent of some of these players, it could shift over time. It could even shift, in the middle of the season. But it's nice to have those options. Makes you feel better about the picture.
I think based on what we saw last season with all the injuries, and with all the guys you had to rotate in on the offensive line, I think it's just as important to figure out who that second group of guys is going to be should you run into those problems again, and see who's going to slide in, who's going to move around, and what your other theoretical options outside of just the starting 5 are going to be, because knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't happen. You could run into the same issues again.
Yeah, and at the very least, you want to find, so all right, here's your 5. Now, who's my 6? Who's my 7? Who's my 8? And perfect world, you'd want to have 5 and 5, your full 10. But at the very least, you want to go into, last year, I think we were talking about going into game week, and we were sitting there trying to gather, all right, who are the 2 starting offensive tackles? So not only you're not even at the point that you're finding 6, 7, and 8, you're still trying to find your top 5. And so, and it really wasn't, that can be 2 things, right? That can be, well, wow, these guys are just performing so well that you don't quite have a starter yet. Or it can be that you have big questions, and that ended up being the case last year. So who's your 6th? That guy could be a tackle, a guard, or a center, as long as you have a corresponding move to get that guy on the field. Ideally, 6, 7, 8, one of those guys is a tackle, one's a guard and one's a center, or, maybe one of them's just a versatile guy. But I think the versatility of this group as a whole, Ja'Kai, tackle guard, Rashawn, center guard tackle, Tree, tackle, potentially guard as well. Those things let you be able to kind of just say, all right, this is my 6th, this is my 7th, this is my 8th guy, and then have an avenue to get them on the field.